Is it a spoiler to know if a game has multiple endings? If you're like me, this question makes you itchy. If I throw up this game and show this number, signifying that it has this many endings, did you just recoil in disgust because you can't unknow that information? I've never played this and I made this number up, by the way, but I think this reaction tells a lot about a person. Some people, like myself, love knowing this because if the answer is no, there's only one ending, I can play however the hell I like. My decisions will not affect the story's final chapter and I can end the game whenever I choose and rest easy that the same conclusion will be reached. But if the game has multiple endings, this is no longer a one-way train. What if side missions weave into the possible endings? What if I am told my morality will be taken into account? What if it's unlikely I'll get the true ending unless I knew ahead of time how the game worked? Persona 5 is a great example. What if to get that secret final act, I have to up certain confidence to a set point? If my friend hadn't warned me of this when I started P5 way back in the day, I would have missed the royal content. But see, in the same vein, if I knew how Undertale worked, then one of its biggest twists and the mystifying bout of genuine self-reflection upon discovering said twist would not land with near as much gravity. To keep it as vague as possible in case you somehow haven't played or watched, there is a basic in-game action that anyone who has played an RPG would do instinctually. You are later told that this action is in fact wrong, and suddenly you are overcome with disgust at how that action is so normal for you. To get the true ending, you then have to play again and avoid that action. When I first played, I had no clue that this was how the game worked. For me, the game did its job and had such an emotional impact on me because I didn't know I could get a bad ending. So I'll ask again, is it a spoiler to know? And of course, everyone is going to scream, it depends, right? But does it? Because if it depends on what the game is doing, then the knowledge of what the game is doing suddenly defines if it matters or not. It's like saying, should I open this pack of old Pokemon cards? Well, it depends on what's inside, but you can't get that answer without destroying the pack's value. You can't uncrack an egg. And in the scenarios like Undertale, where going in blind without that knowledge can create this sensation, I think truly that it is a spoiler to know. And I have a lot of thoughts about this, by the way. I'm not just screaming into the abyss. I have examples and counterpoints and research, and I'm screaming into the abyss. So if you don't mind, I'd love to quickly tell you about today's sponsor, and then we will try to approach this very good question that deserves answering. Have you ever found yourself just a little bit curious what it would take to learn to code? Could you do it? What if you could build a whole career around it? If those are questions that you want answered, you really need to look into Boot.Dev. You see, what Boot does is curate lessons for coding at any skill level, even if you're completely new to it, and best of all, it presents those lessons using modern game design. Over the course of your lessons, you'll earn XP, levels, achievements, complete quests, fight bosses. All of these things are in place to make the grind of coding both approachable and engaging. Boredom is the enemy. Being overwhelmed is the enemy. Boot wants to keep you comfortably in that sweet spot between the two. And the nice thing is that you can take a peek at those lessons for free if you like. There is a demo, and you're welcome to watch or read all their content before you fully commit to it. And if you do join, you won't be alone. There is a dedicated Boot Discord community to help you along the way if you need some camaraderie. So if you're ready to try coding and enter a career path that may mean you get to work from home and potentially make over $100,000 a year based on this Stack Overflow data in the US from 2024, Boot is the perfect place to take your first steps, and every step afterward. And hey, you can even get 25% off of your entire first year on the annual plan if you use my code DarylTalksGames at checkout. Link in the description, QR code on screen. Take that first step, my friend. A huge thanks to Boot.Dev for being such a consistent and quality sponsor of the channel. Now, let's get back to the show. So I played Dispatch recently, and I loved it. The writing was hilarious and genuine, the story was surprisingly heartfelt, that decision at the end of episode 4 had me absolutely stun-locked. And it is a story that I kind of assumed would have multiple endings. But I did a good job of not really looking up anything about this game, and as I was writing this video while I played it, I made it a point to desperately avoid overly deliberating my decisions. I never paused for dialogue options except for here, and unlike my first run of Baldur's Gate, which just felt like playing a video game in a file cabinet of saves.
I saw you with Gale. You two look
Who the fuck?
cozy.
You simply have me fucked up. I was adamant that this would be a game where I simply let my decisions be my decisions. I'd live with my consequences.
What the fuck?
And one thing that I really enjoyed about this was that it allowed the dispatching game itself to beautifully weave into the narrative. Episode 3 is a really good and kind of spoiler-safe example. To keep it vague, the heroes you're dispatching keep making things difficult for you to succeed. They're sabotaging one another because of something going on in the office, and because of that, my dispatcher performance was abysmal. And I felt some dissonance as I played this because I kept thinking, damn, what if my score on these shifts is factored into my ending? Am I shitting the bucket right now? I really don't want to play the whole game, get a lame ending, then think, sheesh, if only I had handled my calls better in episode 3, I wouldn't have wasted my time. It was the first occurrence where I genuinely considered save scumming. And that's a real shame because the point of this shift being as tough as it is, in hindsight, was truly just to echo the narrative of the game. I was supposed to be frustrated with my team. When they don't work together, this shouldn't go smoothly. Robert was frustrated, and wouldn't you know it, so was I. It was brilliant. Dispatch did this several times throughout the game. Circumstances around what is going on in the story affects your success on shifts, as it should. But if you're worried about what ending you're going to get the whole time, that gorgeous harmony between the mechanics and the story is rear-ended by a massive tanker truck of concern over the final result. And I think this is sort of the core of the problem with knowing a game has multiple endings that everything else we're going to talk about today revolves around. There's a concept in psychology research called the good subject effect. If you are conducting a study about the effect of people's age on their generosity, for example, it's your job to find a way to survey people about this without them guessing it's about generosity and age. Maybe you sneak in some irrelevant questions. Maybe you tell them that the study is about something else entirely. Maybe you use a double-blind design. Because if you don't do these things, what can often happen is the participant will realize from the questions, this is about generosity. I better make myself seem very, very generous so I have good results, which immediately tarnishes the intended measurement. And in my mind, this is a distant cousin to what happens when gamers know that a game is measuring their actions to decide on an ending. The second multiple endings are introduced, now you're acting instead of playing. Now you're moving cautiously instead of instinctively. And I think this sullies the intended experience if the game is trying to measure how you, yourself, would naturally act. Maybe if you did something dastardly, you should be caught red-handed instead of avoiding it for the sake of an ending. Maybe if you did something good, it should be because it was in your nature and not because you wanted a particular finale. Maybe if you suck in a round of dispatch, that should be a natural consequence of the narrative. Maybe in a game like Darkest Dungeon, your actions should revolve less around any potential in-game outcome and instead simply what you need to do to progress right now. One of the largest points of this game is to be forced to do things that are cruel to survive and then contemplate what that says about you. Perhaps you give your party trauma in order to get more loot, or you leave your broken party members behind. Are these things horrible? Yes, that feeling in your gut is the moral of the story. A particular ending is not needed to validate that. And the same thing goes for games like Papers, Please and Not Tonight. Juggling a potential ending distracts from the very complex and heart-wrenching choice you've been presented in this moment. And it's games like these that put the simple good or bad options like you get in BioShock or Dishonored to shame. Those games have what psych researchers would call demand characteristics. The questions presented are demanding or cueing a particular response. It becomes obvious, this is a game about morality, I'd better behave then. You're no longer a player, you're a good subject. Or a bad one. Maybe you like being an absolute bastard. Now, we aren't going to focus too much on good and bad choices here because the discussion today is less about morality systems and more about how a game's potential ending can distract you from playing the game the way it's meant to be played. So, if a game has multiple endings, and you reckon that it might because there are interesting side quests or branching decisions to be made, how can a game disguise what it's testing you on? To answer that, let's look at this side quest in Prey. Michaela here wants to know how her father died, and you have the option to investigate this for her. If you do, you'll find that the one who actually laid him to rest was your character. Granted, this is before your character lost all their memories, so you technically didn't do it, but that may not be how Michaela sees it. So you can play her the incriminating voice log you found, or you can simply lie to her. And lying isn't as simple as saving yourself from her contempt. It might spare her pain, you know? And maybe this is a question that she would be better off not knowing the answer to. But hang on, are you just being cowardly by thinking that? Is that your way of saving face? Which choice is actually kinder? All of these questions make the decision far more interesting than the outcome itself, and there are quite a few setups like this in Prey. Do you release this prisoner? Clearly he has a record, but he says those charges were inflated to lock him away so he could become a test subject, which is plausible. So you could release him, you could leave him here, or you could let loose an alien known as a Typhon to slaughter him. Which is right? Which is wrong? It's tough to say, but critically, the game never confirms or denies if what you did was right. Through every setup like this that you discover, there is no little notification about your good boy points, no blonde blazer will remember that. It quietly lets you move on. How does it affect the ending? Here's the thing. Oh yeah, spoilers for a 9-year-old game. Here's a timestamp. How does it affect the ending? Here's the thing. It doesn't. Asterisk. Regardless of how you handle these scenarios, the in-game choice right before the credits is the same. Blow everything up, or kill all the Typhon, or blow it all up but escape. I'm skipping details, of course, but the real key is that at this moment, all of those choices you made leading up to this kind of didn't matter to the ending. You have the same final options regardless. Until...
It's finished. How did it do?
You learn that it was all a simulation. You see, you have been a Typhon all along. Earth has been infected by them all along. This was a simulation to see if a Typhon could experience empathy. These aliens do not have mirror neurons, meaning they can't empathize, so they kill ignorantly. They don't mean anything by it, they just don't feel bad about things like we do. At this moment, unbeknownst to you, it's revealed that all of these moral conundrums did in fact matter. The Typhon you're playing as has had mirror neurons surgically added, and it, i.e. you, were being tested on empathy specifically. But you didn't know. There are very few demand characteristics in this game, and even if you did suspect that these choices would matter, it's unlikely you know that it was about empathy. And you also might have thought, well, the game never told me this would matter like some others do, and that's the point. It would be a spoiler if the game tagged all of these choices with a big integrity-o-meter, or the game told you early on, hey, your decisions are going to matter here, make sure to agonize over them. No, the decisions themselves were interesting enough to agonize over for free. You didn't need to be told to. Prey is a fantastic example of a game fending off the good subject effect because it consistently keeps you off the trail of what it's really trying to measure in the player. So, if you haven't played Prey and you skipped this section, good for you. Those that haven't and didn't are now spoiled because they know what they're being measured on when they play this. Another notch in the yes, it is a spoiler to no column. Hello, I'm here to offer a counter-argument. What about when a game doesn't tell you how its endings work or that your decisions matter, and then the ending you get feels like the developers silently passing you a sticky note that just says, asshole. What are you supposed to do with that? An example that comes to mind is Silent Hill 2. I got one of the bad endings where James is portrayed as not really moving on from his old ways.
Better do something about that cough.
Asshole. What? All because I tried to keep Maria from getting hurt and checked on her a few times in the hospital and didn't inspect Angela's knife and was overall just a nice, normal guy? Oh, I'm sorry, using this apple for this puzzle contributed to this ending as well. Ah, yes, okay, well that makes total sense! And it's times like these where looking up how endings work becomes more tempting than spending money on a gacha game when you're depressed. Because if the game is secretly measuring your actions to surprise you with an ending, that takes a ton of trust on your part that the ending you were handed makes sense for how you behaved. And if you're someone that wants to let the game cook and stay as blind as you can until the credits, this can set you up for a lot of frustration. As much as I sang Undertale's praises earlier, if that late game revelation misses for you, you'd probably just be frustrated and think, damn, so I have to play the whole thing over again? I don't see how what I did was all that wrong, to be honest. Not to mention, if the game is unclear about how the ending is going to go down and you assume that your actions are being watched, it can make you look equally as stupid. There's this optional boss in Expedition 33, right? When I rolled up to it, Verso was like, hey, we should kill it, it'll help. But then when I got there, the game hit me with this. The Neveron does not seem hostile. It sews tirelessly, engrossed in its work. Attack anyway?
I don't know anymore.
What if murking this thing affects some hidden sympathy value and then 20 hours later the game is like, asshole, does this thing deserve to live? Should I even be attacking the Axon? It's just dancing. Is this quest as a whole the wrong thing to do? Do these creatures have a right to live considering that they're just, oh, nope, it doesn't matter. It has absolutely no influence on the story whatsoever. Death to you bitch die. At first, I let this thing live, went and got bodied by this area's boss, and then wandered around for a bit before finally caving and checking this information. Had I known what this game's potential endings would be determined by, this would have been an easy decision and not derailed me for a full half hour. And that's the real problem here. There is no easy answer to this question because sometimes you can trust games to read you and surprise you, and sometimes you give them way too much credit and have to play half the game again, or just look up the ending you want on YouTube, which is like rewatching your team's most recent Super Bowl since they didn't make the playoffs. But all of this brings us back to that original question. Is it a spoiler to know if a game has multiple endings? And despite what I said earlier, I do think it depends, and I think it begins with how a game is marketed and talked about. Because yeah, there are absolutely games where knowing if it has multiple endings or not would affect your time with it, and we should keep that hush-hush. But for something like the Stanley Parable or Slay the Princess, where it's a playable narrative that immediately bombards you with branching decisions, duh, it has multiple endings, that's why I'm here. The Somnium Files is another one that not only makes it clear early on that it's a game like this, but each ending gets you closer to a larger, sinister truth. It's a grand mystery where each ending immediately makes you want to go back and try things differently to unravel the villain's scheme. In games like these, you know your actions matter, but that's not a hindrance on the intended experience, it's a feature. And I think this can quickly morph into a larger discussion of what exactly constitutes a spoiler for a game. Does a trigger warning risk spoiling what is going to happen in the narrative? It certainly has for me. Does a genre tag on a game ruin your expectations from being subverted if you have never heard of Doki Doki Literature Club? Why on God's green earth can no one who recommends Outer Wilds to you tell you anything about Outer Wilds? There is a line to be drawn somewhere between selling point and spoiler that could have been kept a surprise. Where do you personally make that distinction? Is it a spoiler to know anything about a game? And as much as I wanted this video to mutate into that one, the more I wrote, the more I found that I didn't have any elegant solution or meaningful thing to say beyond, yeah, it depends, man. Try to go in blind if you're a player, try to be clear and rewarding, but also subvert expectations when it's fair if you're a developer. It's a fine line to walk, and I hope it sparks a wildfire of discussion in the comments. But one game that I'd like to end this video with does a really good job, I think, of telling you how it will end without telling you how it will end. And that game is 1000 Times Resist. I've talked about this one before, but I've never talked about its ending, and I kind of won't now either, because despite me telling you how it's structured, it won't mean anything to you until you've completely finished the narrative. If you want proof, the game starts at the end. The first place you find yourself wandering is this surreal ocean expanse. There are people you do not know. Each party stands bathing in the glow of a streetlight. You can't interact with any of them, and none of them speak or move. But finally, you speak with someone that resembles your character, someone named Watcher. She speaks in the past tense about something that happened, something your character has done. There are dialogue options, but they don't seem to matter. They're almost written as complete sentences broken into 3 pieces, or basically the same thought phrased differently. They don't matter, hinting that your choices won't really matter, and throughout the game, this type of dialogue continues to really make that clear. She then says, "I want you to see from the beginning." And from here, you're sent to the beginning of 1000 Times Resist's story. Now, a popular thing I've seen games do is that at the very end, you have 2 or 3 options. The narrative is there to influence that choice. Maybe it's a simple good or bad decision. Maybe it's to see where you land on a larger moral dilemma that hangs over the narrative. Maybe it's simply how you choose to approach the final mission. But the point of these setups is to relieve you of the burden of having to go replay a big chunk of the game to get the end you want, or getting too bogged down in your actions. Play how you like, this decision will be waiting for you when you're ready. I like this design. It's very respectful of your time, and 1000 Times Resist uses this structure, but takes it a step further. Your actions during the narrative don't matter, but your impression of what happens is everything. Instead of the game monitoring your choices, it tests you on how well you understood the characters and their choices. Through all of the conflict presented, the complex ethical conundrums, the deep exploration of religion and sociology and pain and family dynamics, all of it culminates at the very end with you arriving here again. This time, these faces aren't unfamiliar. You know their places in this story very well. You know the potentially horrible things they've done and perhaps why they did them. And now, in your first decision that will matter, you decide who was right and who was wrong. Which ones are evil? Which ones are misunderstood? Which ones meant well, but perhaps the world would be better off without? Depending on your judgment, depending on whose streetlight you leave on, the story will conclude with or without them. Is the world you made a better one? Is better so easy to define? Or some games give you a philosophical choice, 1000 Times Resist gives you a philosophical puzzle. How well did you understand the characters? What does it say about you if your ending was disturbing? What does it say about you if you think your ending was great, but a friend who also played the game considers your ending the bad one? There is no chance to be a good subject here. Knowing how this decision will be made doesn't hurt you in the slightest. You cannot act here. You cannot make the good choice for the sake of a nice cutscene. You simply must experience the story in a way that cannot be sullied by trying to guess what the game wants from you. You're forced to understand yourself through these characters. It's one of the most fascinating ways I've ever seen a game end. And look, you knowing how it works doesn't change anything. You have no idea what you do here unless you've seen the plot from beginning to end. It's harmless, it's immune to the save scum, it's Ray Charles to the bullshit, if I could quote Lil Wayne for a second. And I think that's the gold standard. Can a game find some way to pull one over on you and it feel fair, you know? Can you trust that a game, if you decide to go into it as blindly as possible, will surprise you with something that accurately reflects what you've done? And the thing is, for many folks, it is not this serious. They play how they play and whatever happens, happens. Maybe YouTubing the other endings is enough for them. Maybe you're like this. Maybe you look up how a game works so that you can play in the way that gives you the ending you want because you only have so much time to play. For these folks, it's not really a spoiler to know if a game has multiple endings, and that's fine. But I do find it fascinating how developers choose to withhold information in order to get a snapshot of how we choose to act when we think the game isn't looking. I think there is so much potential here, and honestly, I wrote this video in part because I'd love to know about more games that do something interesting like this that I don't know about. So please tell me about them down below, but also maybe don't tell me about them because then I'd know something fishy was up about them. You see how this is a tantalizing discussion? This is why this video was ghost number 6. It felt impossible to navigate all these potential spoilers. But above all, I adore how this is a discussion exclusive to video games. Art across all mediums is there to be interpreted. Characters and stories and grand fiction serve as mirrors to help us better understand ourselves. But games are the one mirror that we can step into and view ourselves not just through our thoughts and opinions about the narrative, but to see how we would organically behave in that narrative. Not what we say we would do if we were in that scene or in that chapter, but what we would genuinely do in that moment. And that is something that deserves just a little bit of reverence. Hey gang, Happy New Year. We are back in the saddle and just getting started. I actually planned to do a different video this month initially, but I had those stray thoughts from the Ghost video last month that I had to get out before I could continue. Thanks so much for the love as always, and if you're new here, I do this every month. Let me know down below what your experience is with this multiple ending conundrum. Like the video, share the video, hit that subscribe button for more, and the bell to know when I upload. Oh, and if you just can't get enough of the show, join me over on Patreon. For $1 a month, you can get access to weekly updates, bloopers, creative input, editing live streams, and your name in the credits like you see here. You might even get a shout out like this month's featured patrons. Soda Run, Soy Senio, Confused Soul, Mature Bradley, Valkyrone, Josh Childs, Etan Levinson, and Button. My friends, it has been a pleasure as always. Take care and have yourself a damn good one.
Hello, you.